the budget for the fiscal year 2021 and 22. So we've heard from everyone on what the budget is about. We've talked about it and met about it at length. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Are we talking about the tax part too, or just
You can talk about it.
Speaking to any portion of the budget, which
any
includes
part.
the revenues as well as the
Okay.
expenditures.
Well, I'll go ahead. The property tax levy amount, property tax is tough for a lot of people. And I know that we are going to face, we're actually incurring inflation right now when you go to the grocery store, to the gas station, or all those kind of things. It's costing more money to live in America, to live in Casa Grande. And what I can't accept is basically in 2021, the secondary property taxes were $1,108,799, but they doubled in 2022 to $22,973.80, and I don't see why we have to have our taxpayers and our residents have to pay that rate of secondary tax. So that's my problem. I can't support it or vote for it.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I can provide, and I certainly understand Councilmember Powell's perspective on this, and what I'd like to do is just focus just briefly on the secondary property tax and tie that into what is an aggregated property tax with our primary property tax. And I've asked Mr. Weaver to bring back up the slide that ultimately outlines our secondary property tax. As you can see, starting in fiscal, and let me start by saying that the secondary property tax is simply levied to pay the annual debt service on the GO bonds that were issued in 2006. So we've built those projects, we've issued debt along the way, and ultimately the secondary property tax is used 100% to pay the annual debt service for that. And so the
But
rate
it's being
is
paid by the community.
that's right. It's levied on property just like your primary property tax is. The secondary property tax is essentially utilized to pay the annual debt service on the bonds we've issued since 2006. Okay, and so if you'll look at the slide here, you'll see that in fiscal year 18, 19, and 20, or excuse me, and I have a different chart. I have one going back to fiscal year 2016, where our secondary property tax was 63 cents per hundred of assessed valuation. It was 63 cents in 2017. It was 60 cents in 2018. It was 60 cents in 2019. In fiscal year 20, the property tax, as has been pointed out, was reduced to 27 cents per hundred of assessed valuation. But the reason it was reduced in that particular fiscal year had to do with a new statutory requirement that essentially it was actually passed in House Bill 2011, and it amended the state statute 35-458 to clarify that all levies set for secondary taxes shall be net of all cash excess of 10%. So essentially what had transpired leading up to fiscal year 20 is that we had built a fund balance in that debt service fund. And ultimately, the legislature passed this new statute, and it required the city to utilize that fund balance, which essentially drove down the amount that we needed to levy at that point in time. And staff presented that to the mayor and council, and essentially advising you that our biggest concern with this new statute is that it's going to give a perception to the residents. They're going to see this. They're going to see the drop, and then they're going to see the increase when we've spent that fund balance. And so this is what we're dealing with today. Ultimately, just to kind of broaden the discussion just briefly for the mayor and council, and to tie in the secondary property tax, or excuse me, the primary property tax, if we had the primary property tax rate there, you might recall that the city has always attempted to levy right around $1. Our primary property tax levy has been 99 cents. 2016, 99 cents. 2017, 99 cents. 2018, 99 cents. 2019, 99 cents. In fiscal year 20, when we presented the situation that it had resulted through the state statute, and we were reducing our secondary tax rate, the mayor and council considered the potential of increasing our primary property tax, essentially trying to maintain an aggregated rate to our residents, and utilizing the additional revenue stream that we generated to be applied to the public safety pensions. You may recall that. Again, staff at that point in time indicated that we asked for guidance from the council and related to the aggregated rate. What we were always attempting to do, knowing that the secondary rate was going to increase in order to pay the debt service, we ultimately knew that our primary property tax would be dropping as well. And so to give the council a bit of a perspective, if you go back to fiscal years 16, 17, and 18, our aggregated primary and secondary tax rate was roughly $1.63, $1.63 per 100 assessed value. In fiscal year 19, it was $1.59 per 100 assessed value. In fiscal year 20, again, to comply with the statute, ultimately, it dropped to $1.33. So I guess.
So Larry, in those years, in 20 and 21, we used our excess
fund balance.
Fund balance to buy that down because we had too much in the fund balance.
Mr. Mayor, in fiscal year 20, that did transpire. In fiscal year 21, quite frankly, the mayor and council may recall that we had interim staff that were handling our budget process for us, and there was an oversight that took place in fiscal year 21. In fiscal year 21, because we did not levy sufficient revenue stream through the secondary property tax, we essentially utilized revenue streams from other sources to make up the difference, okay? And so certainly, again, I understand Mr. Powell's point. I guess the point that I want to make is that if the council elects not to levy the secondary property tax at 5702, or 5702, which is being proposed, we will need to come up with another revenue stream to essentially pay the debt service for those GO bonds. And I say that very delicately, I guess, because I will tell you that when you're dealing with GO bonds, there are certain covenants and restrictions that take place as these bond holders are actually buying our bonds. And while I don't have a lot of explanation for options to consider to replace this particular funding, what I would caution the council is that if you're concerned about the secondary rate, then we should be having some discussions about a blended rate, perhaps lowering our primary property tax and dealing with the loss of revenues in the general fund in order to ensure that we're levying the proper amount for the secondary tax. Now, and just one thing, Mr. Mayor, and I'll entertain questions. Please know that the mayor and council are not considering our tax rates tonight. That's going to be done on August the 2nd. What we're asking for is approval of the budgets, but obviously it ties very closely.
That affects the budget,
and
doesn't
so, and so I would ask, Mr. Mayor, and again, we're following the statutory calendar requirements from a timing perspective with how we're introducing these various options, or the various agenda items to mayor and council. If by chance, as you're adopting or considering the final budget, if there is an ultimate concern on the part of council and you would like us to develop options to essentially reduce our aggregated tax, then we'll be more than glad to do that as we're moving into the tax consideration in August. But with that, Mr. Mayor, I'd entertain any questions.
Mr. Huddleston?
Yes, what I was going to suggest, I think actually over the last 6 or 7 years, we've shown a remarkable consistency
That's
in
correct.
the actual tax, except for those 20 and
anomalies.
21,
Right.
which was an anomaly, but it was a dip.
Right.
And I think if we see Schedule B that includes a total of 6 years or 7,
Onto this slide too, Larry.
Right,
yeah, I think that'll show a clear picture that we've been very consistent.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. Matt?
Also, what I'm hearing, Larry, is affecting the secondary property tax rate could affect our bonding capacity going forward if we don't meet our obligations that we already have that people voted on, correct?
Right.
And we're looking at selling some bonds in the
Right.
very near future is part of our plan.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Herman, it does not, the decision on the tax levy would not directly impact the capacity number. There are state statutes that drive our capacity numbers and what we can actually bond for. But your point about this being.
Could affect our rating.
It could potentially affect our rating from a revenue perspective. You do make a very good point, at least in my opinion, that these are bonds that were approved by our voters. And when we actually went out to our voters, we actually had proposed rates that were greater than what we've collected. We've really tried to stagger our projects, as the mayor and council knows, in order to maintain a secondary tax rate was at a rate less than what we had proposed in 2006 when we went to our voters and asked them to consider those capital projects.
Thank you.
Donna, any comments? Nope. Any comments from Mr. Lavender or Mrs. Fitzgibbons?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, Mayor.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Mayor, I just wanted to make a comment. I do remember, and I understand where Dick is coming from because, of course, I've never been a supporter of raising the tax rates, and I do specifically remember what happened, like you recapped, Larry, in 2020, and I know we had some concerns when that statutory requirement came up, and I do remember when we raised the primary tax at that time, we were very conservative. And Dick, you probably remember this too. We were very conservative when staff came and made recommendations to raise, I think there were 3 different levels. We were really conservative on the increase in that the primary tax. We kind of went the lower recommendation because of our concern with how it's going to look on the primary tax rate, even though the secondary tax rate went so low. So I understand your concern, Dick, but I do I think kind of like what Councilmember Huddleston said, we've been pretty consistent over the years, and so I'm comfortable with that. Just even though it looks like we're raising it so much, but it's really kind of going back to where we were a couple of years before that statutory requirement. So, but I do remember these discussions, and I do remember the concern that we had at that time, and of course that that's where we are today, going back to that time. So,
Yeah, and I would concur with Lisa's comments. I think, and Mr. Huddleston's. I think that we were at 163, we were at 159, and then we dropped down into that 130 range and unfortunately for 2 years. That we didn't catch it last year, and then now we're back more to 157, so we're back to that more of that normal rate. So I don't have any concerns with it myself. Anybody else have any other comments? Mr. Powell, did you have any final comments?
No, I don't. As I say, I just don't feel like we can do this on the backs of our constituents.
Okay. Any other comments on the phone?
no.
No, sir.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, then I will call for a resolution number, please.
Resolution number 5317, a resolution of the Council of the City of Casa Grande, Arizona, adopting the budget for fiscal year 2021 through 2022.
Mayor McFarland, I would move for approval of resolution number 5317 as presented.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Gloria, can I please get a roll call vote?
Councilmember Lavender.
Yes.
Councilmember McBride.
Yes.
Councilmember Fitzgibbons.
Yes.
Councilmember Herman,
Yes.
Councilmember Powell,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Huddleston,
Yes.
Mayor McFarland.
Yes. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and I'll adjourn tonight's special meeting.